What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Real Bodybuilding Podcast. This is episode number 146, and I'm here with the world-renowned guru coach, Hany Rambod. How are you, sir?
Good, Fouad. How are you, brother?
Listen, we've been trying to do this for months, maybe.
No, years.
Well, we're finally making it happen, and I'm happy. I'm glad to talk to you, man. I always like talking to you, but I've had other coaches on, and the question of coaching has always come up on the podcast and who the greatest coach is. And I always say Hany is the greatest coach. So you are.
That's a huge compliment, dude.
Listen, I know coaching is a very individual thing, and each coach is the best coach for a certain person. But overall, Hany, you have definitely set yourself apart. So I wanted to have you on to ask you a bunch of questions about why and how and your business and moving and all the other new things that have gone on in your life. So let's start from, I want to start from the beginning though. How did you obtain the knowledge to be as good at coaching as you are? Like, where does it come from? Is it schooling? Is it experience? Where does it come from?
It's a combination of a lot of things, but I think the number one thing is experience. You know, working with a lot of athletes and being able to work with athletes at a very young age helped me quite a bit, being able to get the know-how to be able to appreciate, like, a woman that was trying to lose 20-30 pounds all the way to somebody who was trying to get ready for a show. It's a big difference, but being able to work with lots of different types of athletes, men, women, even teenagers, as I was a teenager growing up, being so into bodybuilding at a young age, I just wanted, it was like a dry sponge. So I learned so much from so many different people. But on the personal training aspect, I learned from a guy named Joseph Bruno, who was very big into a Dr. Joseph Bruno was a PhD from Notre Dame, and all of the biomechanics and everything that he taught was off of Arthur Jones principles. So I got to take some pieces of that. Then I got to take some pieces from other things that I learned as going out high volume versus HIIT and all of these things, and then kind of building programs. And obviously my education, I focused a lot on biochemistry, biology, with an emphasis on neurophysiology. So it taught me how to read clinical studies, and it taught me a lot of the basics on how to be able to take clinical studies and try to decipher them. So whether it's about supplements, whether it's about training, whether it was about any of those things, so that you can be able to understand the science behind whether it's the training clinicals or whether there was the supplement clinicals, to really be able to better decipher those messages.
Yeah. So you said you were interested in bodybuilding at a young age. How old are you now?
47.
47. When did you start getting involved in bodybuilding as far as your own interests?
When my mom got me a gym membership when I was 13 years old.
Oh, so you started really young.
Yes.
And
I found a local gym that my mom gave me a membership to for the pool area.
Yeah.
In the back of the gym, and she expected me to go to just use the pool. And then I found my way into the gym, and in the San Jose area, there's a ton of Samoans, and the Samoans said, "Come on in here, come train with us." And then next thing you know, I'm doing incline bench. I'm training. I'm starting to eat like them. They eat a lot of food. And it was one of those things that the reason why I did it was because I wanted to get into football. I wanted to become my freshman year. I wanted to go from my 8th grade summer to my freshman year. I wanted to be able to play football, and American football, you know, the guys are much taller than me, and they're much bigger. So I was able to create better results with weight training in terms of being able to make up for the height and the size with strength. So I was able to get my strength up my freshman year. And so when I went into it, I was able to, get starting, I was able to start and everything my first year because of all the weight training.
Did you play football all through high school?
All through high school, all 4 years.
Were you weight training that whole time too?
Absolutely. I started weight training to be able to play football.
Yeah.
And then I got more into the bodybuilding because I've met bodybuilders that were in their 20s and 30s and even 40s when I was at the gym. So the more I was able to do bodybuilding, the more I was able to kind of decide that eventually as a teenager, I wanted to compete.
So when did your first competition happen?
I did an ABA show. I think I was like 19. And I did my first show, and it was a Southern California show. It was the San Diego Championships. I literally only had a couple of people in the teenage class down there, but I was hooked. I was like 140, maybe 5 pounds.
Wait a minute.
And I was natural.
Sorry to interrupt you. So you had a couple people in the show, so you were already coaching some people.
No, I had a couple. There was a couple. Only had a couple of competitors against me.
Oh,
in my
you're only
class.
people could compete with you. Okay, so this is after football now. So you're 19. So high school's over, football's done, and
Right,
you were like, okay, I'm
right.
going to try do bodybuilding now.
Right. I wanted to compete myself. I was helping people simultaneously because I was
Yeah,
working at 24-hour fitness right out of high school. And
yeah,
there were some people that were competing. One of them had just gotten done competing, doing shows. And people in there that I just became friends with, they became lifting partners.
Hmm.
Then there was an older gentleman who was kind of a master's guy. I think he was about 40. And he was planning on trying to do a natural show, but he had great genetics. And he was training with me, and he said, hey, do you mind helping me out here with my contest prep?
Yeah.
Because we started training a little bit together. And he was my first kind of full-fledged contest prep client. And I said, what show are you doing? And he says, I'm doing an ABA show. That's how I got introduced to ABA at the very beginning. I don't even know if they're still around or not.
Yeah.
But he was going to do a show in Nevada. And so he's like, I'll fly you out. You help me. I went out to Nevada. It was in Laughlin, Nevada. And he ended up winning the whole show. And it was funny because I'm like, how are you doing a Nevada State show? But we live in California.
Yeah.
But it was just called the Nevada State, but they didn't care if you were a resident of a different state. And we flew out there. He got ready. He ended up winning the show. He won the overall. And it was kind of like I was hooked as a coach. And then right after that, then I started, competing too.
I was just going to ask, so helping somebody win and then doing your own show soon after that, which one was more rewarding for you? And how'd you do at your show? Sorry, I didn't catch that part.
I took second, and there was no weight classes at the time because it was just teenage. So I got outweighed by about 30 pounds. I was much better conditioned, but he was much bigger than me. And then afterwards he came up to me and he said, I felt like you should have won because your face is so sucked in and everything else. I said, well, you're bigger than me. And he says, yeah, but I was telling my dad that you should have won, and he didn't believe me. And I said, oh, who's your dad? And he says, he's the judge on the left.
Oh no. So a little bit unfair advantage there.
little bit. And needless to say, that was my last ABA show. This is my last show I did with them after that.
How many
and then
shows?
I went to the NPCs.
Yeah. How many shows did you do after that?
I did about 3 or 4 shows after that in the NPC at the Natural Ironman Naturally in Culver City. So John Lindsay shows. I did those. Previous winners were like Skip LaCour, a couple of other big really names. Jerome Ferguson ended up winning. And again, at the time, it's like, how natural really were you really? It's kind of hard to say. Yeah. Because at the time it was a polygraph test, right?
Oh, really?
And so yeah. So it was one of those things that I was probably one of the few people that was actually natural, but it was one of those things. I got as high as second place for my NPC show. And the classes were really big. Some of those classes were like 15 guys. And we had these rivalries in the gym, and it was great. I loved it. I was going to UC Santa Barbara at the time. And I ended up doing those shows because it was only an hour and a half drive from Santa Barbara to LA.
So so you did a bunch of shows there, and then what happened? Why did you decide not to compete anymore? Or like, what was it that made you decide just to,
Yeah. So what ended up happening was I was coaching people at the same time. And one of the clients I had was a director of Microsoft. And he's a good friend of mine. He was in my wedding. He's an older gentleman named John Whitty. I think he just turned 69, and great guy. He's he's like a family member to me. And kind of like Paul is with you, he looks like your dad, He's so old, Paul. You gotta bust his ball.
I'm sure he's gonna love that one.
We gotta throw it into Paul.
Yeah.
But all in all, he ended up as a bonus. He said, "Hey, I was getting him ready for a photo shoot that he was having with his wife, and he looked great. He was so happy. He said, "Hey, Hany, I want to take you to our trip to Mexico, to Cabo."
Yeah.
And I said, "That's great." He says, "You and whoever you want." And I was dating this girl at the time who was managing the Gold's Gym in San Jose. And I looked over to her and I said, "Hey, do you want to go to Cabo?" And she's like, "You don't have to ask me twice. Let's go."
Yeah.
So it was an all expense paid bonus trip. Well, we get to Cabo, and the first night we do some drinking. We go to El Squid Row, which is kind of like the known hangout there. Cabo Wabo, which was Sammy Hagar's gym, his bar.
Yeah.
And had some drinks, went dancing, and I was dancing with the girl I was dating, and she was like leaning over me. She was a lot taller. She was taller than I am.
Yeah.
And she was leaning over me, and then I was leaning back, and I was doing my Matrix move, and showing off my moves. My knee pops.
No.
I just pops. Felt like my kneecap went from the front of my knee all the way behind my leg, and I just collapsed. I collapsed. I'm like, oh man, like it felt like I got shot. And they picked me up. The security guys come over and pick me up. They're like, "Are you okay?" I think one of them thought that I might have got stabbed, right? Like something happened, because it was just like all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, something's wrong with my leg. And then all of a sudden my knee started swelling up. And then they carried me into a van. I got back to the hotel, iced it, and they got me some crutches. I went and saw a Mexican doctor, and the next day, and he says to me, he looks at it and he's like, he shakes his head like this, and he just says, "No bueno, senor, no bueno." And I was like, okay, my broken Spanish, I know, it's not good.
Yeah.
And so then he says, "You need to get a MRI, when you get back home." And it was the first night of our actual, our whole weekend, our 4 or 5 day vacation.
Yeah.
It happened the first night. And then after that, he tried to shoot me up with Nubane.
Okay.
And I was like, no, I don't need any painkillers. Just some, I think they gave me ibuprofen.
Sure.
And then it was funny because I just remember it was injectable Nubane. I'm like, oh no, I know about that stuff. I've heard nightmares about it.
Yeah.
And I just iced it, sat by the pool for 4 days, got home, MRI'd it. They said, you tore my ACL. And so
wait a minute. So
yep.
You stayed for the 4 days in pain and agony and just
iced it and elevated it. That's it.
But you couldn't walk. You walk, so you're on crutches the whole time too.
That's right.
Did you do a lot of drinking?
I just stayed through.
You didn't do any drinking to like alleviate the pain?
I'm not a big drinker, and even back then, I probably had a couple of drinks here and there, but I just popped some Advil, probably had a couple of margaritas by the pool, and just made the best of it. The pain, because of the numbing, as things swell, I think it just became just more of a burden, because you could just feel the inflammation because it swelled up so much. And so I just wrapped it and then just kept ice on there just to numb it. And so I just kind of pretty much iced it the whole time.
How was your mindset? Did it depress you at all? Were you like, this is career ending? This is like, or were you like, it's going to be fine, I'm going to get through it?
I thought I was fine. I was going to get through it. I just literally had gotten done with my show 4 months prior, because that was around December that happened in Mexico. And my last show, I believe, was in August at the Ironman.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to rehab it. I'll take care of it. It's not a big deal. And what was crazy is I went back to San Jose, and somebody gave me a name of an orthopedic surgeon and said, hey, this guy's, a good orthopedic surgeon. You should go get it looked at by him. He writes a script for the MRI. I go, and I ended up going over it with him, and he says, okay, you tore your ACL. And I said, okay. And normal orthopedic surgeons say, well, let's schedule surgery.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, for whatever reason, said to me, you don't need surgery. Wow. And I couldn't. He says, you've got very good, strong quads. Your legs are really good.
Yeah.
You can go with several years without doing it. So you don't have to do it now. And to this day, it baffles me why an orthopedic surgeon wouldn't recommend surgery with a torn ACL.
Okay.
And so he just said, hey, just be a little bit careful when you're getting in and out of the shower because of stability, but eventually it'll work its way out. And then whenever you decide if you want surgery or whatever, but there's people that go a long ways. It was the best and the worst decision I ever made, because I got so much swelling from being on my feet. And through the years, I couldn't train legs.
Yeah.
Like it got harder and harder for me to train legs. And so that, my metabolism suffered. My knees would get really, really achy. That knee would get achy and start swelling, especially after a couple of years of not having an ACL. And then the competitive nature was just thrown to the side because of that. But yeah, if he would have talked me into doing it, because I thought we were just going to go into surgery, and he's like, no, don't worry about it. You could just take care of it later on. Some people don't even get it fixed.
But Hany, knowing what you know, I mean, it sounded like you had some pretty good success coaching already, or had attained some knowledge already. Didn't you think I got to get it done anyways, or did you just believe him to be gospel?
No, I thought he was gospel. You got to remember, I was like 23, 24, and
Yeah.
I went to an orthopedic surgeon, and I honestly didn't want to go under the knife if I didn't have to, because I've never had surgery before.
Yeah,
So,
but wouldn't you think, like, I mean, I guess at 23, 24, I would be in the same position where you'd be like, okay, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. But I would think to myself, how am I going to train again if it's not attached? You know what I
well,
mean?
I was able to train. I just wasn't able to train those
The
probably seven
level.
tenths.
Yeah.
Yes. I couldn't squat 315 like I was squatting before. I was barely doing 135, 185, and
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
sometimes 225. But it was one of those things where you don't feel secure because you don't have that stability, because it's more of a stabilizing
Yeah.
issue. And so as the years progressed and I was continuously coaching, I just focused more on my coaching at that point, because I always knew that's one of the reasons why I didn't take drugs, because
Yeah.
I always knew my genetics were limited. So I didn't want to go out there and just load up. You know, my dad had a form of cancer. My mom had leukemia when I was growing up. There was things that happened with me that I went through, that I made the decisions that I'm not going to go take a bunch of growth and do this and do those things, because you don't know about cell replication. And those
Sure.
are things that I did know even at that age.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to wait till I'm 25. Well, I tore my ACL at 23, 24. So I never got to that point. So I knew it was never going to be a career for me. So
Yeah.
I was a much better coach than I was a competitor.
That's a lot of foresight for somebody at that age, because most guys would have been like, I'm going to take what I need to take to get where I need to get. So, what did your parents think? What did you, because a lot of people have trouble, you know, their parents don't want them to be in the bodybuilding world. What did your parents think when you were coming up and you left football and you started competing and training and all that?
They thought I was crazy. You know,
Really?
they thought I was crazy. Yeah, my dad didn't even like me playing sports in high school, because he comes from an athletic background. He was a chairman of physical education in Kuwait, where I was born, and also the same thing with Iran. And my mom was a teacher. And so you come from a coaching and teaching background. My dad was a coach, my mom was a teacher. And so they were like, you're going to be tired. And if you're tired, you're not going to be able to study. And at the time, I was going into pre med at UC Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very concerned that if you're dieting for these shows while you're at UCSB, how are you going to remember organic chemistry, calculus, all physics, all of these things? They're already hard. And you're depleted, because they saw me do the prep when I was 19 and I was in junior college, and they saw I was a zombie. I did the 2 hours of cardio a day. I did 0 carbs for weeks just to see what had happened. So I've experimented on myself with a ton of these diet principles to see how how far you could take the human body, and to the point where I was hallucinating.
Yeah. Is that what they wanted you to do? They wanted you to be a doctor?
Always. Your Persian parents, you're either a doctor, lawyer, or something, right. You know. You come from Middle Eastern parents.
When did you leave the Middle East?
I was 2.
You were 2.
A year. Yeah, I was like 1.5. I think we came over. We did this. I was born in Kuwait. My parents left Iran in the mid 70s, early 70s. I went to in mid 70s. I was born in Kuwait when my parents were both in Kuwait, and my mom was teaching math at the Iranian school, and my dad was coaching and was part of the physical education program in Kuwait. That's why I have an Arabic first name, but both my parents are both from Iran. So a lot of people pronounce it Hany in the Middle East, as you know. And then in Farsi and in English, everyone says Hany. You know, there's no wrong way, but everyone, the natural way is Hany. How do you pronounce my name? But when they came over, I was literally a year and a half old. And originally they came through New York, and before they moved to California.
So you didn't, obviously you adjusted fine because you were just growing up in America. It wasn't a big deal for you. Growing up where did you grow up? You grew up in New York, or did you move to California like in your early years?
No, in New York, we were just there. I think my second birthday, there's pictures of me. We were in Queens, New York, and they got hit with a really bad snowstorm that year. I think it was the winter of '77. And my dad went to go visit some friends in California. And then he called my mom and said, pack your bags. We're going to move.
Fuck this, we're out of here.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they said. They said, fuck this, we're out. The weather here is amazing. And so, picked up by myself and my mom, brought us back to the Bay Area. And I grew up in the San Jose area my entire life up until about 7 months ago when we moved to Dallas.
Did you experience any hardships growing up in California as a Middle Eastern kid? Because I remember, and the reason I ask is this: growing up in Windsor, I was born in Canada, so I didn't know what it was like to come from Lebanon to Canada, but I was like the only brown kid in my grade school. So I always felt a little bit different. Did you have any of that, or was it pretty like mixed growing up?
It's the Bay Area is very mixed. We have a big
Okay.
Asian population.
Okay.
There's a little bit of Indian, some Middle Eastern, but you got to remember, I'm a bit older than you. And
Yeah.
during that time, there was that whole Iran hostage thing had happened.
That's
There was
right.
a lot of different things going on. So I'm fair skinned for being
Yeah.
Persian.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like, "Oh, are you Italian?"
You got away with it.
No, it's just that people would be like, "Whatever." But I think that it was funny because some of the people would literally pretend that they were Italian, because they at the time there was a lot of hate towards Iran.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have to do that, but I knew people and friends that did.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, I was a bit insulated because I was so young, but I did hear stories of people saying, "Hey, look, I was, the teenagers and the people that were in college, they're like, F you, F you, F you, because of whatever was going on politically."
Yeah.
And but it was definitely, I would say, a much more of a melting pot where I was versus where you were.
Yeah.
It was definitely much more of a melting pot.
Yeah. I want to fast forward to this is the main question I want to get to is, you have a lot of experience in coaching. You started really young, and I know the X's and O's are very, very important. But in your opinion, what is your main attribute as a coach? What sets you apart from the other coaches? If you had to, I know it's kind of like a loaded question because you don't want to, obviously you want to show some humility, but if you could point to something on your own, what would you say?
I think it's really simple. I think that, as you know, because we work together.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
For many
years.
You
spit out your coffee. You're like, don't remind me. Don't remind me.
No, those are some of the best, honestly. Those were some of the best. That was some of the best progress I ever made, was in the 4 years or 3 years we worked together. I mean, there was one off season where I literally went from, I don't know what the analogy would be, but I went from like just kind of a new pro to I can kind of stand on stage with a lot of different people. And that was one off season where kind of things just turned around. But I know what I think your best attribute is, and we'll discuss it after, but I want to know what you think. If you had to,
I think if I had to really
narrow it down. Yeah.
It's really because I just try to critically think of all of the different things that are super important, like the training, the nutrition. I really try to emphasize as much of that base as possible to try to evaluate that and then glue it together with the attention to detail. I think because I've never had a lot of people under my roster. So when I do go in, I'm able to go deeper into those rabbit holes to be able to make sure that I'm connecting with the athlete on a personal level, making sure that we have to figure out, is there financial hardships? Can I help them with their sponsorship? Can I help? Because all of those things are what I consider the glue and the foundation that makes things better and easier, so it creates less friction. And I think of all of those things, where a lot of the other coaches are just looking at maybe one or two different attributes. I'm looking at every single one that is needed for those ingredients to make that special recipe.
Yeah. I was going to say, you know what, that's a better answer than mine. That's actually a point I never thought of, but it does make a lot of sense now that I think about it. But I was going to say, a lot of your value, and I think you took offense to this before when I said it to you when we were working together. You're able to get the most out of your athletes, and I think that's your biggest attribute. It's not the diets you gave me were never like, people think it's some special secret sauce, and they're not. It's like, it's still fish and rice or whatever, you know what I mean? So I didn't think it was anything technical. I thought it was more the way you speak to your athletes. You're able to just get more out of them, and every athlete is different. And I don't like, I'm assuming you had a different technique for each person. Yes. And now that you add what you said, that makes even more sense, because I think if you know your coach is looking out for you in those different areas that you mentioned, you're probably going to give a little bit more. And if they're taken care of, then you can also focus on what you're doing. So what is it do you know that about yourself? Do you know that there's a mental aspect do you practice that, or is that just something natural that you do? Like, what I'm trying to say is it a conscious decision? Like, I have to talk to this person this way to get the most out of them.
No, it's not a conscious decision. It's just part of my personality. I think that it was something that wasn't coached into me. It was just me understanding. And I think that's why, excuse me, the balance between my mom's personality of being super hypercritical and my dad, who's the charming, charismatic one. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
There you go. What ended up happening was I learned from both of them, and I had, both of those different aspects in my DNA. And I felt that I really care a lot about who I work with, and as you could probably attest to, I really do. And so I think the people I've worked with, you, Seth Feroci, Phil Heath, like, I think some of those values that I had maybe might have pulled out some of those in all of my athletes as well, because I think that gave them perspective, which maybe they didn't have before me. And I think as now you have your own supplement company, you're doing your podcast, you got a lot of these things. So you got to put yourself in the shoes of the people you're working with. And there's times where you have to balance that. And I think as a coach, you have to turn around and be therapist part-time, but you also got to be a coach, a nutritionist, a trainer, a financial advisor, all of these things, whatever you need, a marriage counselor, a lot of these things that go along with bodybuilding, because bodybuilding is not a, 2 hour a day type of sport. It's a lifestyle, and you have to be able to create the least amount of friction possible in that person's life to be able to try to get them as far as possible. So I feel that all of those things that I learned as I was working with multiple personalities, multiple people, I've worked with some really, really difficult personalities, and then some people that are super easy to work with because they were much more coachable. And I think the coachability aspect comes from a couple of different character issues. If they've been working with coaches in the past, Phil had somebody that coached him, whether, basketball coaches. So it was much easier. If you're working with somebody who hasn't been in a coached sport, it becomes much more difficult, or those people that quote unquote know it all. So then you're like, why are you asking me if you know it? So I think all of those things determined what my path of least resistance was with working with people. And then understanding that, I fine-tuned it. So when I worked with people, everyone says, oh, you cherry pick, or they say this or that. Of course I do, because I'm not going to bring somebody who I don't feel is going to work with the same core values as I have, if they're not going to be able to work on that same level or that same frequency. But I want to be able to bring somebody who's going to be able to work together.
So just to touch on that, because you brought it up, I was going to actually ask you about this anyways. People have said that, Hany cherry picks. He looks for the greatest physique ever, and then that's the person he wants to coach. What exactly do you have to, like, because if you look at your roster, I mean, your roster's endless, right? But some of the biggest names, Phil, Seth, Nicole Wilkins,
Jay in 09,
Jay in 09, like the list goes on and on. So what do you say to somebody who says, well, you pick the guys with the best genetics and that's why they turned out so good?
Well, it's not about the best genetics. There's a lot of people that came to me that had even better genetics than my athletes. It was, number one, nowadays, I don't have amateurs because I'm focused on Evogen, right? So I'm working so much on that. I have to compartmentalize my time. So I can't just work with everybody. So that's why the people that they're seeing, I'm working with celebrities, I'm working with businessmen, I'm working with a lot of other people that people don't see because they don't want to be featured. Nor does my audience really care about those people, but they care about the relationship that I have with them. So I still work with them, and they don't want to be called out for whatever reason. And at the end of the day, like I said, my audience doesn't really much care about those people. But they don't see is that the last 20 years of all the people that I did work with that just went from a first-time competitor to maybe just turning pro, and then they just hung it up. Okay. There's some people that were like that, and then they maxed out there, or they maxed out at a local show, or they maxed out at a regional show. And I was able to get them further. But those people are not highlighted. They're not on the highlight reel because it was before social media. So and people didn't want to read about those in Flex magazine or an MD. So those people, everyone just focuses on the top people because those are the people that were focused on in the magazines and in the media in general. So again, I've worked with all of those people. And then the people that I do choose right now, I work with a lot of people in regards to off season before pre-contest, and I don't allow them to come to pre-contest with me if I don't feel that we're meshing well. And so there's been times where I would work with somebody for just a couple of weeks, didn't feel like it was a good fit. And I just said, hey, this is not working out. And I just don't feel like the personalities are not matching. We're not jiving. We're not on the same frequency. And I decided to go ahead and just let that relationship go and go from there, because I want to be able to jive with the person, because you're going to end up going into literally battle together. Yeah. And there's no better person than you, because we were at the Ironman. We were at, those shows. I can't remember what it was called then. It was the Flex Pro.
Flex Pro, yeah.
Right. It was called the Flex Pro. It used to be Ironman, but they called it the Flex Pro. And we were there, eating in the room, talking about things, going over whatever we were doing at that moment for the next 2 hours. But we were talking about what we were going to do right after the show, and how we were going to try to grow into a rebound. So all of those things, you can only be methodical with somebody who's on that frequency that you're on to be able to talk at that level. And you need to be able to get really deep in those conversations with people.
Do you think that your mental connection and extra intent with your athletes on the financial side, on the mental side, on their relationship, whatever's going on in their life, do you think that's what took somebody like a Phil Heath, a Nicole Wilkin, Jay? Do you think that's what takes them from good to great, or great to amazing? Like, do you think that's the difference between, because like you said, there's a lot of guys with good genetics, and there's a lot of coaches that help these guys that have great genetics, but there seems to be a different look with your athletes. Why is
it's not the financial aspect, Fouad, what it is, or any of those aspects. It's figuring out the why in that person.
Yeah.
What's their why?
Meaning
why
what?
are they doing this? Like, what is their trigger point? Like, let's talk about like Jay, right? Yeah. You mentioned Jay. Jay in 2009, him and I started talking after the Olympia in 2008 when he lost to Dexter, because he wanted to try something new, because things weren't working out right with Chris and whatever that formula was, or whatever he tried. It just, he wanted to try something a bit different. Mm-hmm. So he was triggered. So I was emotionally dialed into what he wanted at the time, which is to prove himself. So he was willing to do things outside of his normal scope of cardio, the diet, all of these things. And I rode him like Zorro, because I knew I could ride that emotional energy and angst into success if he can be able to make sure to cross the T's and dot the I's of the diet, the training, and everything else. He flew to San Jose the week I was supposed to have surgery for my knee finally.
Yeah.
It was the week of my birthday, and it was 10 years later. So going back to the earlier story, I was, and that was 2000, I tore my knee. It was December 2000, I tore my knee. And then in 2009, January, I was supposed to have the knee surgery. Mm-hmm. He says, well, I'm going to come to San Jose to come and train with you. Well, of course, me, Hany Rambod, the trainer, fuck the surgery. I called up, I canceled the surgery. So I didn't get it fixed until like 3 or 4 years later. And then I finally got it fixed. But that was because everybody came first. If I could get a chance to be able to make a difference to that degree, where, again, we were able to make history together. No one's ever lost to Mr. Olympia and was able to win again in the open class. Yeah. And that would happen that year. And he came in with arguably one of the best packages ever. But it was because of that mental fortitude that he created, because of what happened with the loss, and it slingshot him. Because I realized with every person, there's a why, and that why can change too. Yeah. Depending on how long you work with somebody. Okay. Phil is just, as an anomaly, because he went through so much with his dad passing away, going through a divorce, his ex-wife being sick, all of these things that he just didn't focus on. He just said, look, this is life, but I'm still going to continue to train hard. I'm still going to be able to create a physique that is going to be exceptional. And he didn't use that as a crush or an excuse. And I think the biggest thing that we have in our industry is everybody wants to be the victim.
Okay. How do you mean
that? I think that everybody wants to blame a trainer, or they want to turn around and blame a sponsor, or they want to turn around. They don't like to look in the mirror and say, well, what could I have done different?
Yeah.
And so
I agree with that.
It's like State Farm Insurance. Like a good trainer, State Farm is there. It's like people want to just say it like it's an insurance policy. Let me just talk shit about the trainer, throw the trainer on the bus, go to another trainer. I think it's become a little bit less lately, because people are starting to get outed, because at the end of the day, just sometimes personalities don't match up. So I just feel like I lose a lot of respect for people who try to throw the trainer on the bus. I feel like people really need to put a lot of understanding on what they were able to bring to the table. When you look in the mirror, were you able to cross your T's and dot your I's? Were you able to do the cardio? Because I said, oh, I did everything he said. Well, did you really?
Yeah.
How many people really say, I didn't do everything that I was supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the bigger things. So going back to the whole answer of what is it with all of these different competitors, you got to try to figure out what their hot button is and be able to try to really ride the wave so that you can focus on being able to create that momentum within the prep. And I think that I was able to do that pretty well with the different personalities that I was dealt with. And the other good thing about it also is that I never really focused too much on going after any clients. I always wanted them to come to me because if they came to me, that was half the battle.
Yeah.
Because now I know they're willing to listen.
Yeah.
Now I got to make sure that we can communicate on the right language, in the right language.
I know you did that to me. I knew you were pushing my buttons when you were, because
which time
you would call me. No, and mostly in off season. I mean, all the time, right? But in the off season, I knew when it was happening because you would call me and you'd be like, "You're getting fat." I'd be like, "Okay," and you would always tell me a story about Phil. It's almost like I knew you knew the story about Phil was going to trigger me to work harder.
Half the stories I made up, brother. I just wanted you to get leaner.
It worked though, because honestly,
I know
that fucking off season, like I said earlier, that off season. But I knew it was happening. I'm like, this motherfucker is just doing. But I wasn't totally sure. So I'm like, I better do what he said. Okay, I want to ask you a question about Phil because you brought him up. So, why is Phil so misunderstood?
Ooh, that's a very complicated question. But the short answer to that is the fact that Phil got villainized with Generation Iron. That was one of the major things. I remember going into a mall. That was part of it. That was the beginning. And I think he got villainized because they love you, then they hate you, then they love you again. Yeah. It's just a matter of how many years is that going to happen. I think that people are starting to really understand the Phil now. Yeah. And the biggest thing that's misunderstood about Phil Heath is that he's an assassin. He's a person that is very focused on killing other people's dreams to try to create his own. Mm-hmm. And they don't like to hear about those things when it's coming unfiltered or seeing certain things. And I feel that what's happened with Phil, it would be like John Wick. Okay. I love watching John Wick movies. You like John Wick movies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
But if I knew John Wick personally, that'd be a scary motherfucker.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's Phil Heath is John Wick.
Okay, but
that's when it comes to those things. So I'm saying is that it's when his personality, that edge, that drive, that determination was very unfiltered because he was the first social media or one of the first social media champions. I agree with that. Yeah. And so I feel like a lot of that became misunderstood because people already had a thought of, hey, wait a minute, Phil Heath already comes across as arrogant because of Generation Iron. When they told him it was a documentary that was basically kind of made into a docudrama. Yeah. And they said, act a certain way. We want you to kind of play up an Arnold type role. So a lot of that was coached into what they wanted people to perceive. No one knew that it was going to turn into this kind of like, he's a jerk. He's an asshole. He's arrogant. He's stigma. Exactly. Yeah. And I feel that that's what kind of stuck with them. And then when they just saw him do his job, and because it was so unfiltered, because of the fact that he was just focused on doing what he needed to do for the Olympia stage, this other stuff wasn't set. The stage wasn't set yet for people to understand social media like they do now. Mm-hmm. So people go, hey, let me do outreach. Let me talk to people. Let me connect. Let me do this. All the things that he's doing now, those things weren't really invented yet. Nobody had really done those things yet. So it was more of just a showcase at that time that was more unfiltered, I feel.
Okay, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit.
Okay.
So, and I'm not gonna make this whole thing about Phil. I just want to ask one more question because you touched on it being unfiltered, but I think Jay was unfiltered as well. So I don't want to say he was unfiltered, but Jay was also an assassin. Would you say?
No.
Not like Phil?
No. No,
Okay,
they have
explain.
completely different. So Phil was a assassin when it came to the fact that he put himself in a mindset when he'd go to the gym at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. And if you speak to Phil, he'll talk to you for an hour. He goes to see his fans. He'll talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes.
Why does nobody see that? Like, why doesn't he show that? Like, I know he shows it more now, which I think a lot of people appreciate, because they're like, oh, Phil's actually a nice guy. So I think people like that.
Because think about it. Why isn't that not being highlighted? Because the highlights used to come from Flex Magazine. They used to come from media. Now there's none of that. So unless you have a supplement company like you and I do, you don't have that person walking around with them 24/7, going to the trade shows. You'll hear about it from people, but no one's highlighting that. So it's going on. So if you ask people, that's how he is, but it's not being highlighted. And when it used to be highlighted, it's when the magazines were prominent and it was always written about, but it wasn't something yet had been put in effect on social media. So he's never had a social media advocate before.
Yeah. I'd like to talk to him. I'd like to have him on a podcast one day just to talk to him, because I don't want to make this podcast about Phil, but there's a lot of interesting questions that come from that.
I'm not speaking for Phil. And again, I know. It's just a matter, and I apologize for this bobblehead looking thing, because we had to set up this tripod, and I feel like it's like a bobblehead.
You look great. Stop worrying about.
Yeah, no, I look like a.
Just so everybody knows just so everybody knows who's watching. Hany had a very professional setup before we got on, but it didn't work with my setup, so we had to switch to his phone. Now, just saving you so people know that you were 100% ready. Anyway, I don't want to. You know what? I don't. Like I said, I don't want to make this about Phil. It's a real shame if Phil has always been the guy he is now, and nobody ever knew that. It
is a shame. 100%. That's exactly the case, because Phil is exactly who he is now. It's just that the way that it comes across when you don't have those highlight reels shared, because you don't have a supplement company following you, or again, magazines have been dipping, all of those things. Then what you see is the unfiltered portion, because you don't have someone calling you and going, hey man, let's go and follow you to the trade show booth, and let's make sure that we're seeing that big line with you shaking hands and doing all these things.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff wasn't done. Now, and then again, the personalities are way different. Phil's a very different personality than Jay.
Yeah, definitely.
Jay's more cerebral, right? He's a cerebral. He's a business guy. He's been around for a very long time. He started competing as a teenager, and everybody has their own ways of doing things. Ronnie was different than Jay. Jay's different than Phil. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they're all champions, but they got their different ways. And Jay, he was also a person that I felt like he was much better at the hunt than being on the top of Mount Olympus. He was better chasing, because he's so used to chasing and pushing Ronnie for so many years and so many second places. And so when he got to the top in 2007 and 2008, I feel like that situation, he had it within him, but at the same time, they were trying to go from mass monsters to smaller, more ripped guys when Dexter won. Yeah. And that triggered him to saying, I got to be a big and ripped guy. Yeah. And so that triggered him. But the way that a lot of that stuff was portrayed, because social media was at its infancy back then in 2008, 2009, it wasn't something that you went under a microscope like you are now.
What's the most difficult person you ever worked with?
You.
I knew you were going to say.
That's why you didn't want me out here for 3 years. No, and not in a bad way. It was in a very learning way. You taught me a lot of how to work within personalities.
I knew you were going to say that shit.
No, it's not in a bad way. I don't want you to think of that, Fouad. I think you taught me so much on how to work, because you are obsessed with wanting to win. You are obsessed with becoming better. But sometimes it's really trying to focus the attention about saying, I remember we would sit there and we'd talk about pasta for 45 minutes. You wanted to talk about it.
Did we?
You're like, okay, yes, you'd call me up, bro. I think you forgot some of this stuff.
Oh, I totally forgot.
Yeah. You're like, I like the fact that we changed this, because I was able to get fuller, but I think the sauce, bro, that sauce may not be it.
You used to get mad at
because you would eat the sauce and then you would get acid reflux. And I said, bro, take out the sauce, put a little bit of olive oil, and then that way it can balance it out. And then you call me back and you're like, dude, perfect. Then you get off the phone with me, and everybody who knows you really well is going to be like, this is my Fouad. And then you come back and you're like, bro, That was it. That was the perfect thing. I looked so great. It's so amazing. It changed everything. And then 2 days later, you would call me and be like, bro, we got to go back to the sauce. There's something in that sauce that's really helping.
It is really because I was always trying to find every time we made a small change and I got better. I'm like, that's it.
You were trying. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm trying to eke out every little bit out of every little thing. And then I would attribute things. The thing is, I was kind of micromanaging, not micromanaging, but I was looking at what you were doing under a microscope instead of looking at the entire program. Yep. So every time you made one little change, I'm like, that's it. That change is what did it. When really it was the entire program working together. And I just, I overanalyzed everything. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So when you say difficult, there's a lot of people who had a lot of personality issues. They had like different things where like they would have you wouldn't even hear from them. They wouldn't do send in check-ins. I had guys who wouldn't even send in check-ins. So those are really hard, difficult clients. But I think that because you and I work together and we have a history together, I think the biggest thing that it taught me was try to create digestible pieces of information. And try not to overcomplicate the system. And I felt like that taught me a lot about how to work with people. You taught me a lot on how to put things in certain perspectives so that I understand steps down how you're going to react to these changes or the information I'm giving you, so that you don't overanalyze why I got you to switch from the step mill to the treadmill, or wanted you to do bike to try to keep your legs a little fuller, or try to do certain things. And then not to overanalyze, but like you said, work on macro and not micro when it comes to a lot of the things that we're working on together. But I think that it taught me a lot. But it wasn't, like I said, I've had a lot more difficult. It was just one of those things where I felt like with your personality, I had to figure out how to communicate with you properly so that we can get to the best result.
Yeah, because I remember, I think it was at the Arnold one year. You and Paul were in my room. And I think I had left the room for something or went to the washroom or something. And you said to Paul told me after, he's like, you said to him, he's like, is he always like this? Paul was like, yeah, he is. And he's like, you should smoke weed. Paul's like, I've been trying to get him to smoke weed for years. He won't do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's funny.
I just, it was my personality. I just had to overanalyze, and I was always trying to figure out what it was. So, okay. So that's, I get the award for most difficult, unfortunately. Who gets the award for easiest to work with?
The easiest to work with. Oof. I think that,
I mean, most people would assume it's Phil, but
Phil for sure, because we worked so well together in regards to how many years. So he would know a lot of the things that I was going to do before I did it. So I would call him up and I'd say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to drop the carbs to this. And you'd send the pictures at night. In the morning, we would talk. And he goes, oh, I thought that's what you were going to say. Mm-hmm. And it was like, there would be times where we would go several months without talking because of working back and forth, and we just text instead. And there was just, he knew kind of what we were going to do because the system was so in place that he knew where he needed to look like at 16 weeks out, at 24 weeks out, at 32 weeks out, at Mannion's guest posing show. Like there was all these milestones. So I think that in that case, it'd definitely be Phil. Plus, again, Phil's mindset, you definitely, anytime you get a chance to watch anything, any podcast he does, whether he gets on yours or whoever's, he's got a very good way of being able to compartmentalize issues and being able to unpack the ability to unpack those things that he knows that he can be able to have control over and make sure that he knows what the end result's supposed to be. So everything from the journey all the way down to the end result was about getting better, looking at the previous pictures, looking at being able to, because we were always chasing other versions of himself, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, 2011, 2013. I remember you calling me in 2011 and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, what year was it? He did the Night of Champions. Not Night of Champions. It was, no. It was Ironman. It was Ironman. Yeah.
That was 2008.
Was it that year he looking, or was it? It was a year.
Yeah, that's the year he grew, and then he played, and then that was the year he won the Ironman. He took second at the Arnold a week or two later to Dexter, and then he placed third in his first Olympia. And that was when Dexter won. Jay took second.
I remember seeing him at that Ironman, thinking, "Holy shit!" It was just a different look altogether. And then he got even better after that. But, So he was the easiest. Would you say he was the easiest in year 1 or 2, or just easiest because you'd worked with him for so long?
I think in the culmination of
Yeah.
of all the years, because
Yeah.
it was so automatic with him. He
Was there
really
ever
understood the process.
was there ever an athlete you wanted to work with that you never got a chance to, that you can think of?
Probably Dorian Yates.
Oh, just out of different era kind of thing.
Yeah, different era. Yeah, Dorian Yates.
Yeah.
If it was a different era,
Is-
because he was the person I looked up to the most when I was growing up. You know,
Yeah.
like when I was in the early '90s,
he seems
when
like
I was just graduating high school.
he seems like it'd be uncoachable.
I don't know, because I don't know how much Mike Menser and some of those things really. I don't know if anybody really needed to coach him, because he just took bits and pieces of information and did it himself.
Yeah.
But I think that I would have just loved to see if there was something else we could have, done.
Yeah.
Because again, because also as just a fan,
Of
a big
course.
fan growing up on that. But in terms of modern day, I think that there's just a bunch of athletes. But again, I don't look at it under that filter. I always look at it on, do I think that we are able to connect? Is that a person I could connect with to be able to take that journey together?
So
you hear me, it's not the same as just saying, I just want to coach this person. Is that person coachable, or is my style going to work out with that person?
So that's a really different way to look at it, because most coaches, I would think, would look at somebody like Nick Walker and be like, oh, I'd love to coach that guy. You know what I mean? But you're looking at it more from a personality standpoint too. And like there's a whole bunch of different data points before you. Yeah,
absolutely. I look at it in so many different, the data points is a great phrase, because if you don't, then you're just sitting there chalking it up to something where you're spitting in the wind. If you're going to take somebody who already knows how to supposedly do a prep, or I know what to do for this, or I know that, if they're always saying, I know, and all you prep coaches out there who's listening to this will attest to this, then if you already know, then why the fuck are you asking me? So at the end of the day, don't, take it in. And so I think that was one of the things that I feel like I have to be able to connect with somebody first on a personal level to be able to go down that road.
What is it that you see wrong currently? We've had some health issues in the industry, and I know some coaches have been blamed for certain things, and that's always kind of rough with me. I don't like when people blame their coaches, because everybody's an individual and everybody decides to do their own thing. Is there something you see wrong in the industry as a whole that could be better, could be done better, either with coaches or with athletes? Is there something guys are doing that's not necessary that might be hurting them in some way?
I think the overuse of drugs in our industry needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I think we all talk about blood work. I feel like many people put their head in the sand when it comes to it. We work together.
Yeah.
We did blood work all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago, 11 years, 12 years ago.
Yeah. 12 years ago. Yeah.
12 years ago. And I don't feel that the new coaches out there have the best interests of a lot of these athletes in mind. I think that they become billboards and they become lab experiments.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's not good to be able to see so many people getting sick. And I feel that there is some different issues that are going on. I mean, some people think because of virus or because of this or that. I think there's more clotting going on because of those situations.
Sure.
So you have to be even more on top of your blood work and make sure your hematocrit's not too high. But at the end of the day, the constant blood work needs to be given. And I feel that you can't rely on drugs to take you to the promised land. I think that, everybody wants to know that so-and-so's steroid cycle, and that's going to make me a champion. Or rumor has it, this guy that's in the gym is taking this, so you should take this.
Yeah.
So much of this bro bullshit is going on that it's just become, I think, tragic, because a lot of people are shortening their careers, their health in general. It's just all around negative. And as an athlete, I would really slow down, pump the brakes, and try to digest the information and maybe get different perspective on things instead of just haphazardly following directions.
Yeah.
Because even some very prominent coaches that are out there need to also really understand you have a certain moral obligation to be able to want to try to keep your athlete as healthy as possible as well.
Sure. So I bumped into a friend of mine who had a female competitor come from another coach, and that female competitor was brand new, just starting out. And she was like 19, I think, 50 milligrams of Anavar and 50 milligrams of Winstrol a day. This is a bikini competitor.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I hear these things all the time. I hear these things all the time. And it's also, I feel like it's worse with women, even though I do hear things from men that are like doing 1,000 milligrams of trying a week and things like this. So I don't want to make this whole thing a drug discussion, because I think there's more than just that. But is that the one thing you think coaches now are not pushing the health side of things enough?
Absolutely. Why would a coach give those kinds of dosages or even those kinds of drugs to a bikini competitor?
Yeah.
It makes zero sense.
So what's the solution? How do we, because we've had conversations on the podcast about solutions to health issues, and there's so many different ideas. Have you ever sat around and just considered a way or something either the IFBB could do or a different body could do to help reduce some health issues in the industry?
When you say different body, you mean a third person?
I mean, like if we're not going to put the responsibility onto the IFBB, if we're going to if some other governing body is going to come in and help the IFBB and say, we're going to take over this aspect, we're going to do mandatory blood work or an educational program that's going to tell people this is what you should be taking, what you shouldn't be taking. Like, I just feel like there should be something for people. Like a lot of these girls, the reason I say that is, you said the coaches come in and they say, it's your moral obligation. I think a lot of these coaches don't look at it that way. And a lot of the people that are looking up to them just think they must be right. Like, for example, that 19-year-old girl, she doesn't know better. She must think, well, if he told me to take 50 milligrams of Winstrol, I guess that's what I got to do. And so there's no education. There's nothing for people to look at and go, oh, that's not really what bikini girls take. This guy's wrong. So is there some solution somewhere that you've considered ever that could help the industry as a whole?
I haven't sat down to break it down, but I know when I put my legal hat on, there's certain things that the organization may or may not want to do, because now you're connecting yourself.
Sure.
And I think that the best thing we can do right now is like podcasts like yourself, my podcast, things like that, is being able to educate people into understanding what's high, what's low, and how to go about getting blood work on a consistent manner, talking about it, discussing it, making it an open forum. There's never been more talk about drugs than there has been now.
True.
And it's because of everybody passing away. There's a lot of different things. You speak about it. I speak about it. Seth Ferosi's been talking about it. And one of the things that needs to happen is that dialogue needs to continue. How it's going to get into a structured form, I think still is up for debate.
Sure.
But I do think that there can be a structured form, whether it's inside the organization or outside the organization, to be able to give better guidance and understanding of what's considered acceptable. And I think that it starts with just blood work, because if you're checking your blood work, that's what's going to show whether or not you're healthy or not.
Yeah.
But then that still may not, what's considered healthy, then you have to start breaking down, because then if a girl is getting facial hair at 19 years old and she's getting a deepening of voice, her blood work might be fine.
Yeah.
But she's she's getting male traits. That's not fine. So there has to be, those are the things that have to be discussed and broken down. But I think those are still things that need to be worked out.
Yeah. I want to talk about Evogen. How long have you had Evogen?
I started Evogen in January, beginning of this year. This following year, it'll be our 15-year anniversary.
So for people who don't know, if you are new to the bodybuilding world, this is Hany Rambod's Instagram page. If you're listening on audio, it's HanyRambod, Hany Rambod. 1.2 million followers. How'd you get that? I guess when you have like 60 Olympias under your belt as a coach. But this is Evogen Nutrition.com is Hany's supplement company. So you've been around for I'm sorry, what was the year you started?
2000. It'd be 15 years in this next
15 years,
January.
Hany.
15 years. But I started with one product and I went really slow, Fouad.
I was around. I think I was there. I think I was there for the infancy.
What do you mean you think you were there? I'm going to post up a picture of you with an Evogen shirt on.
No,
I have a picture of you with an Evogen shirt.
No, I know I used it. But what I'm asking is, I think I was there like when you first started, because I remember the original Cellchem product had one formula and then you had to change it to something else. But I think I had
EVP. EVP. That's right. It came in any flavor you want as long as it was grape.
But it's interesting though, because that's a lot of staying power, man. 15 years.
Well, it's been slow and steady, whether I liked it or not, because we were in a very tough circumstance with California and the Bay Area, especially in Silicon Valley. So I couldn't grow because of the people that we wanted to come and work for us, or the talent that we would want to bring in. It was very difficult to get to the Bay Area because of the expenses.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very difficult. And I think that now that we've moved, we've gotten a better breathing room. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things we're doing with the new headquarters. I'm building a new gym. There's a lot of things I'm able to do. But yeah, it's been 15 years. But the first, I would say half of that, it was very slow and steady. I'd only come out with one product with one flavor a year.
Yeah.
And it was just like 1 year we didn't come out with anything new, because it was always 90% of my time was coaching and 10% of it was Evogen. Now it's completely reversed.
Yeah.
90% of my time is Evogen, 10% of it's coaching. So back then, everything was super slow. It wasn't methodical. It was just as I needed something new.
Yeah.
I felt that I could do a better formula, or I could make something better out there for athletes. I came out with it. Mm-hmm. And it was very slow. It wasn't like, I was going to go do a big supplement brand. It was just, I started with a $70 non-stim pre-workout. That was my first product.
But that was a better, you know what, personally, I like that. Like, that's kind of, I know it might not look like it, but that's similar to the approach we're taking. It's a lot slower, because what you did was pretty hard to stay relevant and go at that slow at the same time. Because I don't know if it's just this day and age, but we've released a number of products, not one. And people still are like, when's the next one coming out? When's the next one coming out? And they're not, and you're trying to keep up. So to have 1, 2, 3 products for 7 or 8 years, or however long you did that, is really impressive. And to be able to stay relevant at the same time. So now you've moved to Texas, and you're focusing all your time on Evogen. So what are we expecting from Evogen in the coming years? Anything new in the pipeline that you want to divulge?
Yeah, so the new headquarters is basically going to be up and ready by the end of the year. I'm building a new gym inside our headquarters, putting together the list of equipment that I'm putting for the gym. And I'm excited because we were bottlenecked, for lack of a better term, with 5,500 square feet for the longest time. And now it's going to be a headquarters. It's going to be a gym. We have some warehouse in the back. It's going to be much more functional. We staffed up. We've hired 5 or 6 new people. We're looking to hire more, so that I can be able to really try to create a better infrastructure so that we can create foundation for growth.
Sure.
And I've always liked Dallas. I've been coming here for the last 25 years. And that's why everyone said, well, why didn't you go to Florida? Or why didn't you go somewhere else? I've always liked the Dallas area.
Yeah.
I used to come out here and visit Ronnie back when I was training his girlfriend. I used to stay in Arlington. I know the whole DFW area very, very well. And I think the people of Texas are amazing. I mean, they're very hospitable people. So I didn't feel different or very shunned, because we didn't know, you're going into an area and it's new, but they've been very welcoming. So that's been nice. And my wife still has her store up in Northern California, her supplement store up there.
Okay.
And so she's been running that remotely, and that's been great. And I feel that now, as we come out with new products and some new flavors, and we're just kind of evolving, since we started here in Texas the last 6 months, I'm considering this kind of Evogen 2.0, where I have the ability now to take in some really good staff members, employees, and we're able to really build a better sense of community, because I didn't feel like we've been able to do that in Northern California because of it being so segmented. We had employees in Florida, we had some employees trickled all over the rest of the country, we had consultants, and I feel like now what we're trying to do is trying to build a better base here.
Yeah, I like that idea, because that's kind of how I feel being in Canada. A lot of our people that work with us or for us are all over the US and different places, and I'm like, it'd be nice to have a base. Can you touch on a little bit of how things have evolved for you over the 15 years?
Yeah, the first half of the 15 years was really super organic, slow growth. I had a couple of employees. It was very slow. And there wasn't the I want to go out there and conquer the world type of mentality. It was products designed to take my athletes and some of the top athletes that follow me to the next level, because I felt like there was a big gap. I didn't look at it for profitability or this, that. I mean, those are some byproducts, but you're always trying to do that. That's what I think with anything, like even with my training, it's all about passion first. Then you start to go able to make a profit as you go. But in the very beginning, it's trying to figure out and focus on some kind of issue out there and a solution. And I felt like whether it was my FST7 training, that was a solution to try to increase intensity with my clients working abroad. That was that solution. Then as I started coming out with these products, it was more of a powdered and pills, solution to be able to get their physique to be rounder and be able to create solutions. So as I'm doing this, all I'm doing is trying to continue that without trying to go out there and, conquer the world. I'm not trying to be the biggest supplement company out there at all.
So that's what I mean. That core value of, and I like what you said about passion, because that's kind of where we are too. It's like the passion always has to be there first, and then everything kind of grows around it. So I just,
absolutely,
that's a really valuable thing. Last question, Hany. I don't want to keep you forever. We've been over an hour now. I just want to know about Derek Lunsford, because everybody keeps asking. He is one of your biggest, most popular clients. Is Derek Lunsford doing the Open this year?
We are talking about it. I think that it's one of those situations right now where he could go either way. He could. But is it going to be detrimental to his physique by him sucking down as we sit down and focus on trying to make a better version of himself? Meaning that he wants to eventually do what Hany did. And I'm not going to be one to hold him back. He wants to go open. He's going to go open. At the end of the day, some people think that it's about my titles of 2021, 20. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? So you're like, oh, the reason why he's going to keep him down is this. I'm going to ultimately let him make his own decision. But I feel like as we're sitting down and seeing where his physique lies at 19 weeks out, what him and I are doing, we have to really assess what the pros and cons are when it comes to every category of the financial, the hardship of bringing the weight down. And I don't want to hold him back. Just like I didn't hold Hany back. Otherwise, Hany, I think, could have won the 212. But I didn't. I'm add to it. But he says, I want to go for the Sandow. And he said that in Farsi. He goes, the Sandow is what the real Mr. Olympia is. I'm sorry. That was the thing. He's like for him, that's his end goal. I wasn't going to hold him back and say, hey, suck down, do 212 so that we can turn around and put a little notch on our belt. So if Derek feels the same way, we're going to go forward with it. I'm just going to make sure to present all of the information, and then he ultimately makes the decision where he wants to go. And I think here in the next couple of weeks, we have to figure that out, because he's right on the cusp. So that's the big thing.
After seeing him at the guest posting he did with Nick and Hunter, I don't know how you can get him to 212, man. He looks like a monster. Like, what is he at right now? 250?
Yeah, like, he's hovering between 248 and 252.
Like, you're gonna have to strip off 10 pounds of muscle to get him into the 212. Where do you think it's? Where do you think, just to play a game?
But let me expand on that.
Go ahead.
We stripped off muscle last year too.
Oh, I know that, and I already know that. Like, I can tell by his I could tell by his structure and his muscularity where he should be.
Yeah.
Where do you think he would place at the Olympia if he was to do the Open this year?
You know, I don't like being able to break it down and say, hey, look, guess, because it really depends on his peak.
Sure.
If he can peak, right? There's always a little bit of chance added in to be able to peak. And if he can peak, I definitely think he can be in the top 5, top 6 if he peaks right. But it's one of those things about being able to peak and making sure who else has peaked or who hasn't peaked. Because I feel like a lot of Open gets flack right now because not everyone's really peaking.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's why everybody's so upset about the Open and saying we need to take the conditioning to a whole nother level. This is what needs to happen. That we'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that what really it comes down to is you got guys like Hunter, Ian, Nick, Hody. I mean, even Brandon Curry.
Yeah.
Our current Mr. Olympia, because the first night he wasn't on at the thing, right?
Yeah.
And then he came back better the second night. So I feel like there's a lot of people that are just wondering what's going to happen. Is he going to be on? Is he not going to be on? So I feel that it depends. Those guys are all great bodybuilders, but it's really all is predicated on, the fuck up fairy.
Yeah.
And if that fuck up fairy comes or not the night before and sprinkles her magic dust to be able to really like make you hold water, stress you out, your cortisol spikes, or maybe you just had a bad prep because something happened. And I feel that what needs to happen is it depends on who's peaking, because everybody's so close in that top 10, that possible top 10, that whoever's on can make really big strides, because it's not like the Ronnie and Jay show anymore. It's not the Phil and Kai show.
Definitely.
And I feel like there's that dominance is no longer there. So therefore, there's guys that are 4th, 5th, 6th right now that can jump to 1st, just depending on if they peak and some of the other guys don't.
Yeah.
That can happen because you don't have those placeholders like you used to.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you're coaching so many great bodybuilders, how many Open guys do you have now? Just Hody and Derek if he moves up.
Yeah, well, no, and then I also have Mohammed Fouad, my new he's out.
He's
in
very
Dubai.
good too.
Yes, so Mohammed Fouad, and he just placed top 5 in his first pro show in the Cairo after the Olympia. So he went up against about 3 other Olympians, and he placed top 5 in his first pro show. So he's going to be getting ready for a show this year to try to qualify for next year.
I'm just going to show everybody really quickly who he is, because he's got a phenomenal physique as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to find a good shot here, but this is you and him together. Yeah.
Yep. Mohammed. Yeah.
How old is he?
And he's in his late 20s. He's like 20, I think 27.
Yeah, he's
20.
He's impressive.
Yeah. He's got a really good physique. He actually reminds me of you a little bit too. Like he's one of those guys that wants to go out and win, and he's like very passionate.
Yeah.
And he's like really a person that is super intense. He's like an intense person. He's like, let's go, coach. Let's go. Just tons of passion.
What do you do? So the question I had for you is, what do you do when you have a Hody and I'm sure a lot of people wonder this, because I used to think about this with Chad and with you and Phil. And what do you do when you have Hody and Derek if Derek does the Open? How does that work coaching wise?
The same thing as I did with Jay and Phil.
Okay. But explain to people, like even me, like tell me, how does that, you obviously have, I know like you don't have a favorite, but you'd be like at that, using that analogy or that example, you'd been working with Phil for a number of years when all of a sudden you're working with Jay.
Yeah.
So how does that work for you emotionally? Are you still emotionally invested in Phil, even though you're trying to peak Jay, or is it just like you shut it all down and it's just X's and O's?
It's X's and O's. You're trying to do exactly what's needed for that job. You're trying to make sure that if somebody's peaking, they need to get ready. I remember the year that Jay tore his bicep.
Yeah.
It was 2011.
Yeah.
And Phil was right on.
Yeah.
And he said, go spend more time with Jay, because I'm perfect. Like, dude, my money, you saw what I look like.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go eat and go sleep. and then I'm just wake up in a couple hours, come back and look at me.
Yeah.
But you need to go spend more time with Jay because you got to get his body right. Because I know that with the tear and all of that, he had injury, you know, he tore his bicep. And so a couple weeks before the show. And so that's exactly what happened. But all in all, what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring in everybody at their best and let the judges make the decision what happens. I think all of these guys, whether it's Nick Walker, Hunter Labrada, all of these guys, you if you're working with anyone like that, you just want to bring everybody in their best. And then it doesn't matter. The name is secondary. You want to bring everybody in their best and let that person put in their work to be able to show how they've improved to be able to get to that goal of winning the show or placing as high as they can. So what you do is you really try to take that out of it. You just try to put your 100% of your focus. And as long as you don't have too many people, and that's one of the reasons why for me, my system it's not scalable like that.
Sure.
I can't work with a bunch of people. And I've had that opportunity where people have come to me at the Olympia and I felt like where I had to say, look, this is not going to work. I can't bring you on because it's going to take away. I already had Nicole, I had, you know, Phil, or I had Jay, I had, you know, all these people. And I'm like, too many people is going to be overload. It's not going to work within the whole mechanism of my system, how I check people and look at them every 4 hours. I would, you know, look at somebody like they did 2 meals, maybe rest up, take a little nap and look at them during the last 3 days. And, so you got to see how that's going to work within your system, but you want to give everybody 100%. And then by the time they're on stage, if the top 2, like when it happened in 2011, I basically started kind of like walking away from the stage because everyone's like, well, don't you want to see who's going to win? I said, no, I don't care because you know, my guys are top 2, right? It was a phenomenal day. I was super proud and super happy, but at the end of the day, I mean, Phil even felt bad a little bit, I think, deep inside because Jay lost because he beat his friend. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, he started a legacy and he went on a tear. But I think that when you look at it, whether it's Hany, you know, with his type of physique, and then you have Derek with his type of, they got to just bring in their strengths and then let the judges do whatever it is. So if Derek does end up doing open, then that's how it's going to be treated. It's no different than Jay and Phil.
Have you had conflicts amongst the athletes? Have you had an athlete come to you and say, you're coaching him for the same show? This is...
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Like way back in the day. Yes. Yeah. Way back in the day. Tell him to go fuck himself.
Too fucking bad.
You know? Yeah. Like, no, because it would be something like if somebody had an issue to that degree. Yeah. That's problematic. You're dealing with somebody like that's going to try to tell you who to work with or who not to work with. That means that they're not respecting you. And in the beginning, as you're building your name up, you have to kind of endure some things that you don't have to endure as you've become more established. I see. And I feel bad for those people coming up because they might have to endure some younger mentality instead of saying, I see. I understand.
Okay. So if you're starting out and that happens to you, you're going to have to like eat some shit kind of.
That's right. That's right. Because you're not going to have the name maybe or wherewithal to be able to say, go fuck off. You know what I mean? Yeah. But now they're going to say, well, what if he says me to go fuck off? They might, you know? So it's one of those things.
Well,
you know?
Hany, listen, man, I've had fun talking to you for the last hour, a little bit over an hour. Is there anything you want to say, a message you want to give out, or anything you want to promote before we go?
No, man, I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a long time. We've been talking about, you know, trying to get together. Congratulations on everything you've achieved and you've accomplished. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
You know, every time I see that, I go, is that H for Hany?
Only you would fucking say that.
You know, I got to just take those little jabs when I can. We don't talk as often as we should.
That's fucking funny.
Yeah. So Hermes, or it's Hermes. It could be Hermes.
Yeah.
But all in all, I just want to say thanks. And I really feel that there needs to be a little bit more open discussion about educating young athletes out there, whether they're bikini, bodybuilder, figure, all of these things, and not be so tied to thinking that solutions are on the bottom of the vial. I feel like the training, the nutrition, all of those boxes have to be checked before you get into there, and ask multiple people. If you're a beginner and you're starting out, ask multiple people if these dosages, if you're kind of a little bit don't understand them properly, get some different perspective. And, I think that's the best way to be able to go about it, because at the end of the day, we love bodybuilding. We want people to be healthy at the end of the day, but we do know that there are some things that go along with this sport that we can't always control. But yeah, it's been fun, man. It's been fun. And again, don't take offense to what I said about difficulty. I really feel like it was something that I'm glad. Yeah, don't
Listen,
do that.
I know who I was. I know how fucking insane I was when I was competing. Trust me. I don't take any offense to it at all, because like you said, there's a difference between lazy and difficult, right?
Yes.
So I'm totally fine with it.
When you weren't difficult, you just overanalyzed a bit. But yeah. I just think that it was a really good experience for me, because there was unraveling that from prep to prep.
Not to worry, man.
Was good.
I'm not as sensitive as I used to be. A little bit, not as bad as I used to be. Anyway, listen, let's do this again sometime, either on your channel or mine.
Yeah. And, yes, I'm gonna get you on, man. I got to get you on the podcast. I got a lot of stuff that I want to go over with you at some point too, and say hi to Summer.
I don't know what you're going to ask me. You can't get me in trouble.
No, get you in trouble. I don't even know what you're even alluding to.
I don't know either. I know something's going to come up. Anyways, okay, Hany. Yeah. I had a lot of fun, dude. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, brother. We'll talk. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and like the video. And if you get a chance, check out the description for all the different links to all the different places you can find Hostile and myself. And lastly, check out hostile.com for our new line of supplements and all of our apparel and gear. Thanks again for watching.